The Great Gospel of John, revealed from the Lord through the inner word to Jacob Lorber. Volume 6, Chapters 67 and 68. Jesus explains the immortality of the human soul and the cause of the fear of death. Chapter 67. The immortality of the human soul. Said the innkeeper, "I also have received many teachings out of your divine mouth already, but I nevertheless have some important questions in the background. One of them appears to me of the biggest importance for life, and if it pleases you, I really would like to have the question answered by you." Said I, "How does your question thus sound?" Said the innkeeper, "Thus, Lord and Master, see, man knows it pretty well. This means through teachings that his soul, of which one also have only a vague idea, is immortal, but with all still so firm belief, the bitter feeling of an absolute death, and finally full disappearance from the rows of the living and its self-conscious beings is always present. With the thought about an existence beyond the grave, even with the best will, one does not easily get used to so that the heart can experience joy about it, but one always shudders about it anew, because in this most important point, man, despite all still so vigorous efforts, cannot obtain any light from anywhere. But because death and grave are the most bitter thoughts of man, and since there is no durable light about it which can be obtained from somewhere, some people cannot really be blamed that they plunge themselves into the whirlwind of the world to stun this black thought in themselves. Thus, about this highly important point, a real light from your mouth, O Lord, would be truly highly necessary. Since to what use would be even the most wise teachings to man if he does not possess absolute clarity in this life's consciousness about the life of the soul after death? One does not follow the laws and the teachings, but more for the sake of the eternal civil order rather than for any certain obtainment of the everlasting life. As far as possible, I'm still one of the loyal followers of the laws of Moses, and always have loved to communicate about spiritual matters with the most knowledgeable wise of all nations. And in the end, they could not say anything more about this questionable point than I myself. The Romans say, and also the Greek, this is the very fateful veil of the Isis, which until now no mortal was able to lift. Yes, this is said quite nicely, there is also a lot of truth to it, but it is unfortunately not of any use to us. For the dead does not feel, hear and see nothing anymore, and we, who still gnaw on this life like worms on a rotten piece of wood, see, hear and feel about the dead nothing else than their dead and stinking body, which within a few years turns to dust and ash. Thus, Lord and Master, since you are life itself according to your teaching, give me, and actually all of us, a doubtless light about it, since truly, I really do not want to live another year together with this gloomy thought of death, the grave and destruction." Said I, "Yes, my dear friend, your question has been put quite well, and from it shines a human need of the highest order. But to give you such a teaching about it, in order for you to feel the everlasting life of your soul by a decisive, clearest consciousness in you, is an exceedingly difficult matter, since, see, I actually have come into this world to thereby give to man the full inner realization of the everlasting life, if he completely lives and acts according to my teaching, or even if he is familiar with it, but does not live accordingly, he cannot attain this inner life consciousness, since I am alone the only way and door for it. You see a blossom on a tree, but you do not see much or even nothing about the future fruit during the time of blossoming. Only when the blossom has fallen off, a very small fruit bud becomes visible. But inside the fruit, also the seed with the life germ must grow. But where is it to be seen in the first small fruit bud? There it seems to be all still the same. The ability is already there, but for some time you will not be able to discern it from the other lifeless parts, wherein no life germ grows. But when the fruit reaches full ripeness, you will easily and effortlessly discover the seed. And see, it is nearly the same with the full and clear soul life consciousness in man. For as long as man does not have this in himself, for as long the soul in its body is not life ripe, she is still too closely connected to its flesh, and thus cannot perceive itself and feel much differently than the very lot of its flesh, and even the best explanations cannot give to the still life, unripe soul the inner, totally ripe life consciousness. However, once a soul has attained the said life ripeness through its own actions according to my teaching, then every further proof for it is completely unnecessary. Or do you require proof that you are now living in your body? Surely not, and you had to laugh everybody into the face who would try to prove to you that you are now living in your body, are moving and be active in all directions. But if you lay down in a deep sleep, could even the most convincing proof that you are still alive be of any use to you, since you are not in the position to understand it? See, also every animal has a soul, whose being is also a spiritual substantial entity, and thus must be of an indestructible nature. Otherwise, it could not give to the animal limbs any movement. But go and explain it to an animal, what is its soul, and how it lives through only its soul. Would an animal understand what you have told it? Surely just as little as if you had explained it to a rock. But why does the animal not understand it? And why does it not have the words to share its feelings with another creature? See, the soul of an animal is necessarily still too deeply buried in its flesh and feels, except for the need of its body, nearly nothing. If someone wants to train an animal for a very simple task, he must give it a lot of effort to awaken the animal soul out of its flesh to such an extent that it can understand what the person wants from it. Do you, however, believe that there exist people whose souls do not stand too far above the animal souls, yes, sometimes seemingly even been surpassed? Now, to bring such souls through the words to an inner life consciousness, already here on earth, would be a totally futile exercise. For these people, a blind and dumb belief is sufficient here on earth, so that their souls, after the death of the body, can continue to live in the beyond, and either have to await a reward or penalty, so that thereby they submit to some lawful order, like the ox in his yoke. Everything else must be kept for another state of life. An animal can only be brought to any useful activity intelligence by all kinds of pain-producing discipline, equally so with a totally simple worldly person, whose soul strives only for the satisfaction of body needs, and except for the ability to speak, cannot show anything substantial above the soul of an animal. Chapter 68. The Cause of the Fear of Death. Said I, that people like you until now could not have attained the certain consciousness of life of the soul after the death of the body. I already have shown to you the reason, and you will have understood it. But the fear of the bodily death does actually not lie so much in the uncertain consciousness of the life of the soul after the loss of the body, but a great deal more in the love for the world and in self-love. Through these two types of love, the soul is more and more mixed into its flesh, and the result of this is that thereby the feeling of dying, vanishing and ceasing to exist, becomes increasingly strong in her and must express itself in all kinds of fear. See, the primordial fathers of the people of the earth did not have any fear for the death of the body, but often only a longing for it, to become free from the body, becoming frail. Because of their God's pleasing way of life, from time to time they had bright glances and visions into the beyond, and thereby attained a clear and true consciousness about life of the soul after the loss of the body. But in current times, almost all faith of man in God has extinguished, from where should the bright consciousness of a life of the soul after the bodily death originate? I say to you, if nearly in general man already doubts the foundation of all life, it is no wonder anymore if one strongly doubts the life of their own soul after the death of the body. Go to the Sadducees, and you will find that they are people who firstly are very material and love the world and themselves above all. Secondly, do not at all believe in a god. And thirdly, totally denying the immortality of the human soul, and scold everyone a fool who believes in any which way in the immortality of the human soul, which is nothing else than a crazy fantasy picture of an insane person who wants to prove it by empty speeches. Look further at the true cynics, scholars of the world, wise Greek Diogenes. They are even true enemies of life, and they curse any force which gave them life without their permission. Indeed, they live extremely well behaved and sober, and despise all luxuriousness, yes, even the slightest comfort of life. For them, the biggest relief is death, after which they do not expect life, but extremely desirable non-existence. Therefore, you still can today find people in India who interact with souls of deceased people, just like with still living people, and talk to them about thousands of secret matters. These people do not have the slightest trace of fear for the bodily death. To the contrary, the day when a person dies is for them a true cheerful day, and the birth of a child into this world a real sad day. See, as such, regarding your question, people are very different. What is highly feared by one nation is not feared at all by another nation, with different teachings and expectations. But the people who fear death of the body the most are the Jews, and the reason for it is their great love for the world and sensuous desires. Who maintains them with so much care like the Jews must lose in time all higher light. Since nothing is more harmful for the right and living light of faith than sexual misconduct. All kinds of lecherousness and real carnal whoring, which for a long time already is a worse common practice with the Jews than even the most darkest heathens. This sin really suffocates the soul in the mud of the flesh and even kills the flesh itself. If, however, so, from where should such a soul take the bright light of life consciousness? You are now a person who pleases me a lot, and at the right time I will place again the life consciousness in your soul. But during your younger days, you also have quite keenly submitted to fleshly pleasures. And see, this is with you the main reason why you, despite your questioning studies, could not have come to a fully true and infallible light. In your present, more chaste life, you will also attain more of the inner life light, and not ask like you have asked just now. Did you now have understood me quite well? Said the innkeeper. Oh yes, I have understood you only too well, and say together with the Romans, Hinc ergo illae lacrymae, thus those tears, which means, this is thus the reason. Yes, yes, Lord, you omniscient, my youth follies have consumed a lot of the life strength of my soul, and now in my older days I quite well noticed the loss. The only question remains, how can one replace it to at least some extent? Said I. For as long a person lives on this earth and has a complete living serious will, everything is still possible, about which David provides for you a living and tangible example, since also he has at a certain time, which is not unfamiliar to you, sinned a lot in the sphere of the desires of the flesh. But at the right time he changed out of love for God, did not sin anymore, and therefore became a man according to the heart of God. Since truly I say to you, in heaven there is more joy about a sinner who as such acknowledges his sins, abhors them, has true regret, exercises a right and reasonable penitence, and betters himself from the foundation and does not sin anymore, than about 99 righteous people who never needed penitence, Or is it not the case among the people that a person has more joy about what was lost and found again, even if it was of a very insignificant nature, than about his great treasures who never got lost? See, it is the same with God. And if it was not like that, truly you would not have me as a guest in your inn. It is true that your youth sins have caused you some harm, for your flesh and also for your soul. But since you have recognized this, and have completely turned away from sin, I have come to you in your house to fully heal you from your maladies. But where I have entered once, there also is the fullest forgiveness of all sins, and the light and the everlasting life has entered itself. I can therefore tell you that a great salvation has come over your house and yourself, and the results of that will make you more closely familiar with it than I myself now. For I now have given you the teaching and the promise, but only in the fulfillment will you discover the fullness of the truth in you.